And having lived in Western Sudan, where it was the kidnapping risk was for expats was 100%. To our knowledge, we were the only expats who lived there that didn't get kidnapped. We just thought we can't stay in a country where there's gunfire and shooting everywhere. So we evacuated, and it was something like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Hi guys, Matt here from Frontiers. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Raw Mission, the podcast where we bring you challenging and inspiring stories of ordinary folks sharing the good news of our extraordinary God in some of the toughest parts of the world. In today's episode, I've got Trish joining me, and you're going to love hearing from her. She's one of those people who's willing to be vulnerable and authentic, to share the stories that might not make her look good, but bring a lot of truth and encouragement to others. Well, hi Trish, it's so great to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you. It's so great to be here.
Tell us where you are. Tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're located right now.
I am in Eastern Chad. I am married and have 6 children, ages 2 to 12.
Wow. As my Pakistani friends would say, mashallah. Praise
yes.
God. Wonderful.
Yes.
Big family.
Yes.
Yeah. And how long have you been there? And is this where did you grow up as well? Give us the sort of little history of how you ended up there.
Yeah, I grew up in the U.S. in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas. Okay. When I was 18, I became a believer. And then my junior year of college, I learned about the nations and the need and part of God's vision for saving people and redeeming people from every tribe, tongue, language. And that really resonated with me. And so I finished college, and then I went to physical therapy school, and I worked for a few years, and then I moved to Sudan. And then we were there for a season, and then we moved to Chad in about 6 years ago.
Okay. So you were a single at that point when you moved to Sudan, first and foremost?
I was, yeah. Yeah. My husband and I were on the same team.
Ah, okay. You're both singles on the field. That's just like me and Jess then, huh?
Yes, it is.
Well, we weren't on the same team. We were in different countries, but...
Yes.
Oh, wow. In fact, someone was telling me this morning, is there a funny proposal story around how you guys got together, got engaged?
There is a funny proposal story. Keith wanted to do something special. And so he picked me up from work. I was working as a physio in this clinic. And he had a picnic lunch, and we went to an island on the Nile, in the middle of the Nile.
Yeah. And
when he was scoping out the island, he interacted with these people, and he was like, these people were asking him, do you want drugs? Because apparently when expats go to that part of the island, they want drugs. Keith was just looking for a good picnic spot. So then after, we got engaged, he asked, I said yes. We were just like, he was telling me about when he came. And you know how sometimes when a story happens in Arabic, you would tell it in Arabic, right?
Yes.
So he tells me that part of the story, like the drug part of the story, in Arabic. So he's in English, and then he flips over to Arabic to say that part. Little did we know there was a man hiding in the bushes, eavesdropping on us.
What?
And at that point, he pops out with guns blazing, like, I'm taking you to the police because you're here for drugs.
Oh.
So, yeah,
was he a police
that's
officer?
how that went. I don't even know what he was,
knows, huh?
but it was plenty scary, whatever it was.
Wow.
But we prayed and tried to convince him that we were not interested in drugs, and he let us just leave. So that's what we did.
Wow. Well, yeah, usually all my stories about language learning is about how important it is. That's the first language and culture story I've got, which it turned away against you. And yeah.
Yeah.
Did you actually learn Arabic then while you were both singles on the first team in Sudan?
We did. Yeah. And Keith also learned a tribal language, but I only focused on Arabic.
Okay. Wow. And yeah, give us a little potted summary of what was that like? How many years were you in Sudan?
Yeah, we were in Sudan for six or 7 years, and it was wonderful and hard, and all those things wrapped up into one. We did language learning first, and then we were in and out quite a bit just because visas were hard to get. And then we moved to Western Sudan, which is where we had hoped to be all along. And it was really a special short season. We were there in the city where we had hoped to be less than 9 months before we got kicked out. But it was sweet. People came into the kingdom. We got to really closely walk with people and disciple them that we're still friends with to this day, like very close friends. So,
do you know why you were kicked out? Was it to do with the new believers?
Oh, it wasn't personal. It was just everybody. Okay. All the cross-cultural workers. Yeah. That was the year.
Yes. Yeah. No, that rings a bell. Yeah. The listeners heard me tell my story, so I won't go into that. But yeah, we have a similar connection there as families, because that was for us. That was 2011, being kicked out of Pakistan.
Yeah.
So. And at this stage, did you have kids as well, or was it just the two of you when you were kicked out of Sudan?
We had 2 kids and 1 in the oven.
Okay.
Sorry, I was pregnant. I don't know if that phrase translates.
That translates. 1 in the oven. That's good. And so, did you have to go back to the States at that point?
We did. Because I was planning on delivering in the capital. But yeah, when we got kicked out, we went and we had our 3rd child. And then then we moved to we went to South Sudan. I forgot. Yeah, we were in South Sudan. And then we were there for 3 months, and then what became the Civil War broke out. And so then we evacuated to Kenya, and then landed in Kenya. I started to feel not good. And since we'd never lived in Kenya before, and we'd lived in Cairo before, we went to Cairo. And that was kind of the beginning of me having some near burnout. And so that year, I think we lived in like 5 different countries. So that might have been part of the near burnout piece.
Yeah. Gosh. I mean, that's one of the things, I suppose, when people think if you're going to go overseas and serve the Lord overseas, live with the people, learn a language, I think sometimes we get the idea that, great, you just sort of settle in and you can be there as long as you want and spend your life, like much as the guys did a couple of 100 years ago. They didn't have visa issues, passport issues. They just would go, dig deep, and they had lots of difficulties. But it wasn't this transition, this, I feel like it's a Damocles sword. There's always just something hanging over you. Will I get that extension? So yeah, you guys moved around so much. Even now I can see you're just trying to think, which parts of my story should I tell? Which elements? But yeah, how did that burnout, I suppose, I mean, what did it look like for you, and how did you work your way through that?
Yeah. So my oldest daughter, by the time she was 5, she had lived in 25 houses. We had, the minimum we had lived in a house would be 3 months, and the maximum would be 7 months.
Gosh.
At that point. Yeah, like we were moving so much because we were trying to get out to Western Sudan, the city. And so, we would end up house sitting a little bit, and then we would end up just doing, we have to leave this house for XYZ reason. So we would move, and then, we can't get a visa. So we move, and, now I'm pregnant, and we now need to go back to the US to have this baby. For one of the kids, we planned to go back to the US because of medical reasons. And so it was just so much moving. And when we got kicked out, of course, that was really a hard experience. And then, but South Sudan felt like, well, we can still work with the people that we want to work with in South Sudan. And they've only been a new country for 2 years. Surely the honeymoon period will last. Yeah. We thought, like 5 years. That's what we thought, 5 years. And I mean, it just didn't. And so,
do you mean honeymoon in terms of them wanting foreigners to be there and long visas?
No. Like, they're a brand new country.
Yeah.
And they have had so much trauma as a country. And so we figured there would be some sort of intertribal problems at some point. We just thought it wouldn't be so soon. Mm-hmm. And having lived in Western Sudan, where it was the kidnapping risk was for expats was 100%. To our knowledge, we were the only expats who lived there that didn't get kidnapped. Wow. We just thought, we can't stay in a country where there's gunfire and shooting everywhere. So we evacuated, and it was something like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yes.
And because of the way the US government is, you can't just come back to America because you need to heal. Like, you have to have a proper reason to be there. And so we thought, well, we know how to live in Cairo. Let's try to heal in Cairo. And so I was seeing a counselor and trying to just rest. But what my near burnout looked like from an emotional perspective was I had paralyzing anxiety.
I bet.
Like, we had 3 little kids and I could handle being out with my family for like 7 minutes. And then I would retreat back to the room. And Keith in that season did everything. He cooked, he shopped, he took care of those 3 kids. All I did was nurse our baby and he did everything else.
It's just so debilitating. But panic attacks and things like that. If you,
it wasn't exactly a panic attack, but yeah, it was just it was paralyzing anxiety, and it was like my body just shut down and said, I can't do anything else. And I historically have been pretty good at forcing my body to push through things, and so it was quite a large feeling because I couldn't push through it this time. And we called our pastoral coach, and he gave me a burnout questionnaire, and I was in the near burnout category. And he agreed, let's try healing, try just to do life-giving things in Cairo. And it just didn't work. I started at the very end, I started having like paresthesias in my arms, like kind of funny nerve sensations. Okay. And my vision would go out for like a few minutes at a time. Wow. Yeah. And we were like, okay, we need to not do this anymore.
The body keeps the score, they say, don't they?
Yes. And so...
eventually all those moves, all that insecurity, especially if there's a threat of violence and kidnapping around. I've had friends who've worked in Sudan, more on the NGO side as well with Tear Fund. But just the idea that they have raiding seasons.
Every day.
I mean, even every day, you don't know quite when, a tribe will come across and steal some cattle, bring some guns, just drive into town, grab some stuff and go again. So you never quite feel like you know what's happening.
Yeah. Every time Keith would go out, we had this joke. I would say, hey, don't get kidnapped. He'd be like, I'll try not to. Yeah. It was very intense. And then it just all manifested in my body, like you said.
It's like mini trauma just builds up. And eventually it has the same impact actually as a major trauma, as though you'd been through it yourself.
Yes. Yeah. So then we moved back to the US.
Develop. So after the US, was that a time where you actually found you could get a bit more healing and just more time?
Yeah. So we came up with good reasons to be there where I could still rest. Right. And I started getting better instantly. I was in a town with people that I had 20-year friendships with, very safe relationships that were long-term. God had always provided great friendships for me in all of those transition points, but I didn't have any that spanned all of those years, if that makes sense. We weren't able to do life together with anyone year in and year out because of all the transitions.
Yeah, the best friends often you've got such deep history with, don't you? Those people who know you, even known you in your teens or in your 20s, and then it makes such a difference. Yeah.
Right.
If you feel I'm not myself right now, I'm not laughing and joking, I don't feel strong, I don't feel capable, and all those, but you've got people around you who know you. They know exactly who you are. You don't have anything to prove to anyone. Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah. So I started getting better right away. I did counseling. Eventually the counselor was like, I think you're okay. I think you just need people. And I was like, okay. And we have a psychiatrist or psychologist that works for our company. And I met with him and he said the same thing. I think you just need to rest and you need people. And so I rested, and Keith and I just had a rule, like only life-giving things. And if you're not sure, you can try it once. And if it's not life-giving, don't do it again. Yeah. And so I only did life-giving things. I really got better. I was able to, I was pregnant again, and so that of course is, always a factor. But I was able to really heal. And then we did a sabbatical, which was so life-giving. And then at some point in the sabbatical, we decided to move to Chad because we could work with the same people. Yeah.
I mean, there must have been moments where you thought, I can't do this. I can't go back to Africa now. It's just felt too hard.
Yes, absolutely. We tried to, something we have tried to do consistently over the years is like, when you go home for a home assignment or a furlough and you're back for 3 months or 6 months, well, you don't usually feel like going back the second day you're in your home country.
That's true.
And so we've tried to be really disciplined over the years as well. We're not going back tomorrow. We're going back 6 months from now. So let's not try to be in that spot. And think about that. And Keith he's such a good husband and ministry partner. He's told me multiple times over the years, I will happily be an engineer in America and be married to you. We don't need to do this life anymore. And just giving me that freedom over and over again.
Yeah. That's powerful. First and foremost, we serve God. And then we look to what's he doing with our family and so on, and all other ministry assignments they come after. Yeah.
And that freedom has really helped me. So when I would say something like, I don't know if I can go back, he would say, that's fine. We don't have to go back, and we can take all the time we need, or we don't have to. And so that would give me that space I needed to heal. Without any pressure.
How did you, just because Jess has been writing her dissertation about shame and church leadership, and what do church leaders do with shame when they're struggling, when they're feeling a bit broken or disappointed or frustrated, or I don't know, how Jess and I talk about this. It must be the same for workers on the field. There are times for us too where we feel like we shouldn't be here, or we just feel like this is all wrong. And how do you work through the voices that shouldn't be coming at us, but they do, whether it's self-criticism or from someone else? How did you manage to sort of push through that?
Well, I had a very supportive church, home church, never, ever, ever put pressure on us. Like, they're just like, y'all are amazing. Y'all are great. Take the time you need, rest. How can we help you? Like, they sorted out a house for us and a car, and they were just great. So that's really helpful not to have any pressure from there. But, honestly, I actually don't think I dealt with the shame piece very well at all, because I don't think I knew about it. Last year, I've had a very unhealthy relationship with food through my teens, through my whole adult life, trying to overcome food addiction, gluttonous eating, comfort eating. And I did a trauma addiction / trauma healing program last year. And at the beginning, we studied shame, and I was telling Keith, like, yeah, I probably got some shame. And by the end, I was like, honey, I think shame rules my life. Now, I was being a little dramatic, but
you're not alone in that, Trish. I think we all carry. I think we all carry shame, but you're right. So often we're not aware of it.
Yeah, and so I think that I didn't do a great job navigating the shame that I was experiencing, because so much of it, nobody's parents are perfect, and everybody's parents are doing the best they can. But you just are the way you grew up. You parent yourself, you talk to yourself the way your parents talked to you and interacted with you. Yeah. And I didn't know any different. And so that's where a lot of my addictive behavior coming from, just this need to comfort myself. And I didn't have a healthy tools to do that. So did you
did you find that going overseas exacerbated some of that? Sometimes people say that, whatever our issues are here, they're probably going to be at least under a spotlight, maybe magnified when we're under stressful situations. And obviously when you're living in countries that we've lived in, that there's a lot of extra stress that we're not aware of. So we lean in on our habits, our go-to comforts, I suppose, to numb ourselves.
Yeah, I absolutely think there's truth in that when you move cross-culturally, that's a stress that nothing in life has prepared you for until that point, unless your family lived cross-culturally, which for most Americans, they've only visited other countries for vacation.
Yeah, it's totally different, isn't it? Yeah, and the impact on a marriage can be huge.
Totally.
Yeah, Jess and I, our first year in Pakistan, I think it's probably tough for all sorts of reasons, just other stuff going on in the town we were living in and then being kicked out and so on. But yeah, probably the two toughest parts of our marriage were times when we were just moving around, didn't know where we were living, where we were going back to, what our jobs were, particularly at that stage. Because when you don't have, it's like being on ice, isn't it? You just can't get a grip anywhere. And so pressure on your marriage, pressure on yourself, and those habits come to the surface, I suppose. Yes.
Yeah, we have had our absolute darkest season in marriage and chat. All of those issues just hit the fan. Yeah, I mean, people have different beliefs on spiritual attack and the unseen realm, but I do think that when you are living a kingdom lifestyle where you're really trying to share God's love and extend his kingdom, you're gonna face trouble. You're gonna have spiritual resistance, and we have had that so much.
Yeah. Do you want to say if some of the other troubles or attacks, challenges, low lights of your time overseas?
Yeah, so obviously the moving has been hard. We have miscarried multiple times, which has been really hard.
Sorry.
One of our children was molested, touched inappropriately. Thankfully, it was a one-off incident because we were able to move from that situation. But it was very, very hard. The loneliness for me in just living and not having relationships that to use that Hebrew word for love, like Hesed community, like really bonded, connected living life together, committed to each other like family, community, not having that all these years.
Tell me more about that, just in terms of, I'm trying to picture you, through all these different moves. Now, if you've got a team and you're stable in a city or a town in the Muslim world, then your team might be a strong sense of hesed and community. But I suppose if you're being pushed around and moving from place to place, you didn't have a strong team for many years in one location.
Yeah, when we were team leaders, we had a lovely team. They were beautiful, wonderful people. We just were very rarely in the same place at the same time, and then our whole team was moving, and so our whole team was in Cairo, and then our whole team was in Khartoum, in Sudan, and then we moved to the West because the door opened, and so you got to walk through those doors when they open, because they're not open very often. I mean, that's something I still grieve. Like, I dreamed of us raising our kids together.
Yes.
And it didn't happen, and it's not going to happen.
Jess said exactly the same, because so I'd been 6 years in Pakistan, you might remember. And then when Jess and I got married, we were there for 1 year, but before we were kicked out. But during that 1 year, we recruited a new team. And we felt like, we've got this dream team. We love these guys. And, some of the kids are same age as our kids. And it's going to be amazing. We're going to live a decade in Pakistan or more together. And then we were expelled just as they were
12 months
in country,
later.
learning language down country.
Right.
So we were never in one town together at all.
Right. Yeah. It's so hard. It's so hard. That part of this lifestyle is so hard.
And now, did you say you've now actually lived in the same house for 6 years?
We have lived in the same house for 6 years, and it has been amazing. I mean, most of our kids, this is the house that they remember. Our older kids, when they see pictures, I remember that. But this is the house that feels like home to them. And it's so precious. And I have joked with Keith, like, I've always wondered, I've been in the kitchen with women and they'll say, oh, bring me that green bowl. That's my guacamole bowl. And I've been like, how do you have a guacamole bowl? Well, it's because you live in the same place for a long time and you learn that this bowl is the best for the guacamole size that you need for your family. And now I have a guacamole bowl.
Wow. When you were, having had the burnout, having recovered and found that healing in the States, you probably were thinking, how can we go again and face that again? Because we've had so much movement and difficulty, but you didn't know that you'd get the next season of your life would be 6 months of stability in one house, raising your kids and presumably your team.
Yes, right. Well, we actually decided as a result of our sabbatical not to be team leaders anymore, or for a season.
Yeah.
And so we joined a team, and then eventually decided to become team leaders again, but have not had anyone join our team. So while we have had the same community in some ways for a lot of that 6 years, maybe 4 or 5 or 6 of those years, it hasn't been the same team. It's been more of like a God's team situation.
So people just from the international community.
But when we were looking for the next field, we knew we needed something more stable. And we thought Chad would be that, and it has been.
That's awesome. Yeah, you never know what's coming around the corner in life, do you? Whether you're serving overseas, whether you're living in your passport country. But it is great to just to remind ourselves that there are seasons. There are seasons where there's a lot of chaos. And some people might be in the middle of that right now. And there are other seasons where the Lord gives us respite and just restores our soul.
Yes.
Gives us a bit more of the green pastures. And that's, I suppose, the encouragement that even if you're in the midst of chaos right now, it's not always going to be like that.
That's right. That's a good tip for parenting too. If your baby's in the tough season, don't worry. You only got another month or two and it's going to change.
Yeah, that is so true. Yeah. Tell us about the car accident that you guys had.
We were traveling to a town about 13 hours south of us in a vehicle. We were on mostly bush African roads, no self-service, no nothing. Our plan was to have a prayer event with some colleagues and friends in this town. And then Chad has a game park, like an hour away from this town. So after the prayer event, we were going to do a holiday at this game park, our family. And
there have to be some perks about living in Chad in the desert, huh?
Yeah. No, yeah. This game park is basically just for hardcore safari people, but
okay.
But we've heard it's nice, you know. So we're driving on this bush road. We had literally just gotten out of the car for a stretch break and gotten back in the car. And we switched drivers and I was driving. It's hard to describe, but we were driving over somehow this little land bridge, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So it was narrow. And then I hit a patch of sand. So much like you would hit a patch of ice, like black ice, and your back wheels would fishtail. Do you say fishtail?
Yeah,
fishtail.
Definitely the back of your vehicle just starts to swing a bit.
Yes. Yeah. And I tried to, you know, I did not grow up with ice, but I did remember having the thought, okay, I'm supposed to steer into this, not jerk away. But it was just too late. And the wheels went off the back and our car rolled 2.5 times and we ended up upside down.
Yep.
And all but 2 of us were unbuckled because everyone was still getting back in the car. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah.
But you know, I mean, in America, we buckle up and we're pretty diligent about it. But you know, you're on this African bush road. You've been driving for like 10 hours. Just go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we call it our miraculous rescue. We don't talk about it as our car accident. We renamed it during our debriefing, our miraculous rescue. And everyone climbed out of the car. I think I had a concussion because I lost consciousness for a few minutes or maybe just less than a minute because almost everyone was out. But by the time I got out, and Keith was great. I turned back around and he's holding our toddler who has a forehead cut, which, you know, those foreheads and scalps bleed like crazy, but they're actually not that bad. You know what I mean? Yeah. And he was like, his cut's not that bad. It's just bleeding because it's a scalp. And I turn around and I look at the car and I'm like, what have I done?
If you're enjoying this podcast, why not give us a 5-star rating so that more folks can hear these inspiring stories and join us in praying, sending, giving, and going? Or how about inviting me or one of my colleagues to speak at your church? I'd love to hear from you. Email me on matt@frontiers.org.uk. And now back to the podcast.
Yeah. And he was like, his cut's not that bad. It's just bleeding because it's a scalp. And I turn around and I look at the car and I'm like, what have I done? And he's like, listen to me. It was an accident. It's not your fault. I need you to focus. And every time that shame and blame kind of would creep up, he would say, it's not your fault. It could have happened to anyone. You're a good driver.
Yeah.
You know, and he just helped me. Like, he just knew that I would be blaming myself and he just helped me, like, stop.
Yes. And the kids were all fine. No one was seriously hurt, just the cuts and bruises.
Yeah. Wow. But even the kids didn't even have just that one. Our toddler just had that one cut.
Wow.
And, you know, Keith had our baby was crying. Yeah. He was buckled in one of the seats and he was crying. And Keith had literally just grabbed him to pull him out and comfort him. And I feel quite sure that he would have been crushed to death had Keith not pulled him out.
because he just
and another gal that was traveling with us had a bruised. Yeah, Keith was just holding him. Another gal had a bruised rib and, just a few minor injuries. But I mean, everyone should have died. Anyone who sees that picture is like all of our friends thought we had died. All of our local friends thought we had died because they saw the picture.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that takes me back to when I was doing earthquake relief work in Pakistan, 2005, and I had a very similar situation. For me, I don't think I hit anything. I was on a pretty fast road, but I was doing 30, 40 miles an hour, coming out of a small town. And for me, it was a puncture. I didn't know it at the time, but suddenly, and you were in a similar vehicle to me. We had one of these 4x4 Land Cruisers, and they're just little boxes on wheels. Yeah. They don't have any stability, right? Really. So suddenly the back just started swinging, and I couldn't hold it straight, and I flipped just like you guys, probably 2 or 3 rolls into the ditch on the right hand side, landed by a tree. Yeah, right. Amazingly, because if you've ever, people who've ever seen the Karakoram Highway all the way up through Pakistan to the Chinese border, it's got huge ravines either side. So any other place, hundreds of miles I could have just been down a ravine and dead. But thankfully, I was just coming out of a small village town. And so I was just landed in a rubbish heap on the side of the road. And then all the guys started coming out. I didn't know this town. I was just driving through, but they all came out, helping me out of the car. I just popped the seatbelt, grabbed my laptop. You have funny thoughts, don't you? Oh, is the car going to blow up like in the movies? Right. Which hardly ever happens. But anyway, I got myself out and just thought, I don't have a scratch on me. Thank the Lord. But my car was a mess, shattered windscreen, crumpled roof, and the locals totally trashed. Sawed down a tree and pulled it back onto its wheels and so on. And but yeah, for me too. Wow. That was a real reminder of God's protection and how life can be so short. But I was just on my own in the car. I can't imagine, as a mom with all your kids and your husband, just double that, triple that sense of emotional fragility at the time. Yeah, it was hard, and we were out in the middle of nowhere, and so Keith had to. He just started running down the street. Oh wow! Yeah. Holding his phone, looking for bars. Yeah. And he found a guy, and a guy took him to this random tree and said, "Stand right here." And then he found a bar, and he was able to call the people that we were traveling to help. Yeah. And actually, when they were coming to rescue us, they one of them rolled their car, and we found out later that road had been cursed. Interesting. And and lots of people had accidents in that exact area. Interesting. Is it? It's funny because when you live in countries like we've lived in, well, for me certainly, and Sudan probably for you, maybe not Chad so much, but people say, "Oh, isn't it so dangerous? The terrorism, the sectarian violence." And yeah, sure, I had teammates in those kind of attacks, but I would always say to people, no, the mosquitoes and the roads are far more dangerous. If I'm going to die, it's much more likely it'll be the roads than any kind of terrorist attack. We're also, these stories just kind of prove that. And you see vehicles down these, in the river and off the side, and landslides and all sorts of stuff. So it is one of the dangers we face, isn't it? Dodgy roads. For me, I don't know if you ever saw anything. It reminds me of another time, probably even more scary than the accident I was in. The crash I was in was I was traveling one time with some friends out to their village in Pakistan. And there was, one of these big colorful buses off at the side of the road. And lots of people were getting out to just go to that village. And as we're in a small sedan car, just, normal car, going up about probably 50 on this long road in between, called a GT road in between towns. Okay. And just as we went past the bus, thankfully the driver had slowed down a bit, but a little girl just rushed out from behind the bus into the path of our car. And he hit the brakes and we hit her. It was just horrifying, but she hit the bonnet of the car and flew sort of 20 feet in the air and landed on the ground. And of course, your heart's just stop. And I thought, oh no. But immediately she jumped up and burst into tears and ran off to her mum, which I thought, okay, that is incredible that she's crying, and, you know, because she's moving around and so on. And I mean, I was shaking for the next hour. I mean, there's more to that story.
Of course.
In the sense that my Pakistani friend in the car said, oh, they probably pushed her out in front of the car to get money of us, which I was like, what? How could you say that? Surely no one would ever do something like that. And I don't think that happened. I genuinely think it was an accident. But people were gathering around the car saying, give us 300 rupees, which is, you know, like £1 or £2 or something. And I was like, no, you know, get her parents in the car. Let's go to the hospital. You know, it's another 45 minutes to the town, but just bring her in. Let's get her checked out. And all they wanted was a few pounds from the wealthy foreigner and his rich Pakistani friend, I suppose, from the city. But yeah, just shaking I mean, you guys must have been just so shaken for that next couple of hours.
Oh yeah. Even sometimes today when we talk and think about it, we feel like we all should have died, or sort of worse yet, some of us should have died. You know what I mean? Like the fact that we all survived with no injuries, no major injuries is just so sobering, and such a affirmation that God is with us and he protects us, and what the enemy means for evil, he can turn and make good.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, you know, I suppose one of the things on this podcast we try and do is, you know, bring this idea of the super spiritual missionary, you know, down off the pedestal. And thank you for sharing some of your stories already, which have helped us get around some of those false ideas. But of course, there are folks like us, people who've worked overseas, who have died in car crashes too. So we're not unaware. We're not stupid and think we have some magical protection because we're foreign workers, that we're not going to get sick or die in a car crash. It does happen. So it's just by the grace of God, in any individual situation where we're protected. We don't know why, but we just thank God and press on till he's ready to call us home.
The longer I live, the more I realize that there are tsunamis of evil that God is holding back from touching me every single day. And what actually gets through his loving hands is so small compared to the massive amount of evil that he protects me from and my family every single day. His goodness is so crazy, amazing, and extravagant.
That's so
because you know, the longer you live, the more you can find out what can go wrong. You know, I mean, you just, the list of things that you've seen at age 43 that you hadn't seen at age 18, right? It's just, and I'm sure it's going to only become powerful. More so. And, but
I mean, that reminds me as well of one of the ladies in a terrorist attack in Pakistan that I spoke to a day or two later, and she showed me the bullet holes and so on. I've shared this story before in the first episode, but she, in the very place where it happened, was saying to me, that's where the terrorists were. And she pointed over there in the playground, and they opened fire with automatic weapons at her. And all these bullets just flew around her, missing her, passing her, going through her hair. And then one clipped her finger or her hand, and she got a little tiny wound, and then somebody grabbed her and pulled her inside, and she was safe. But that matches what you're saying. There's so much that could hit us. And actually, by the grace of God, we're okay.
We just get nicked.
And we get a nick. But and some of those nicks are very painful, and we have to work through them. And
are very painful.
Years, and there is trauma. We're not immune to it. But yeah, God's, you know, we have to just hold on, I suppose, to God's goodness in the midst of it, don't we? Wow. Tell us a little bit about what you do in Chad. I haven't really, you know, are you still working in physiotherapy? What does Keith do?
Well, we work with we have a church visa. And so we spend about a third of our time in equipping believers, a third of our time sharing God's love with not yet believers, and a third of our time in prayer and intercession.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
I don't do physio formally.
Yeah.
Of course, you know, I I do it for friends and whatnot, but not formally.
Yes. That's really cool. So, of course, most of our workers around the Muslim world would not be able to get a church visa or a missionary visa, but there are a few countries, and you're in one of them where you can get that kind of visa.
It's very unique. It's very unique and wonderful.
Real blessing. How long have you got? Do they give you a 1-year renewable visa, or do they give you 5 years?
I think it's a 1-year visa. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but I mean, it's so like plug and chug. We just apply for a new one and it comes.
Great. Oh, wow.
It's kind of crazy. Like I know.
Yeah. We've talked a little bit about some of the hardships for you personally in your marriage, some of the kids, the accident and so on. There was another thing you mentioned to me when there was a burn. Was it in the kitchen?
Yeah. So when one of my kids was a crawler, right? Like not a toddler, but he was crawling and sort of pulling to stand or pulling to kneeling. It's a really tiring day. I was getting dinner ready. The oven was on. He pulled up, he put both of his hands on the oven and he got stuck there. He couldn't get off.
Yeah.
I think he was shocked by the pain and he was there for a few beats because we couldn't tell that it was like a negative sound. We thought he was playing.
Oh yeah.
It was one of the most horrible things I've ever experienced. I mean, I still, that same kid who is now a healthy 5-year-old, he got a burn on his foot and I got triggered. I was overreacting to it.
Yeah.
And I realized, oh, wow, that's still a little raw.
Mm-hmm.
I felt so much guilt and so much what I now realize to be shame. It was horrible to see him in that much pain and to know that I was standing just a foot away from him, but I just didn't, the oven was right behind me.
Yeah.
And I was tired and it was not my best mothering moment.
Oh gosh, but it's every mother's nightmare, how many, isn't it? Every mother's nightmare is that, your child, and father, for me too, you see your child to get injured and it to be partly your fault or something like that.
And now that I've had some time and space from that, I can look back and see there have been about 1 million of those circumstances where I could have anything from losing my child, like in an airport, to them like breaking their neck and dying. Mm-hmm. Like could have happened 1 million times. And it's that same idea. Like God has protected us 1 million times and covered my mothering mistakes 1 million times. But this one was it was really hard. And we were hosting we had a lot of Sudanese and Chadian friends in our house. And they all rushed in because I was screaming and he was screaming. And, I'm a physio and I know what to do for a burn, but I mean, that all just shut down. And we called our friend who's a doctor and he came over and put his hands we put cool on his hands, but our friend who's a doctor, was like, no, we need to get his hands in cold water completely, no matter how much he screamed. And he really helped us. And then for months after that, I'm teary right now, just re-talking about this. Sure. It was every day, I was the best person in our city to do the wound care. Mm-hmm. I have the most training, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's part of physio training. And so I did my baby's wound care. Keith would hold him and I, with shaking hands, would change those bandages and debride those wounds every day. And it was horrible. It was horrible. There's a certain kind of ointment that I thought there's no way we can get it here in the pharmacy in our village, our small town, but Keith, just go try to find it.
Yeah.
And he came back with tubes of it, tubes, like an abundance of it. He called me and he was like, they have it. And I was like, buy it all. And I just felt so seen by God. Yeah. I felt so seen by him. Like, I got you, baby. You need a cream and I'm going to have that cream for you. And, we had never found that cream in those pharmacies since. Yeah. Every once in a while I'll look and to see if it's there, and it's never been there. Wow. God is just so kind to just provide what we need. And he still has scars on his hands, and he'll have them for, for his whole life, unless he he's a secure kid. I don't think he's going to need to have some kind of surgery when he gets older, but for months I had to carry him because he couldn't crawl anymore and he wasn't walking. I carried him. I think we both dropped a lot of weight. I think I dropped like 15 pounds just from carrying this big baby who would normally be crawling. Yeah. So it was physically tiring every day. Changing his dressings was just horrible. Like, it was just this horrible crying fest. You can't, I don't want to give my baby painkillers every day for months. Right. That's not, that's not good for him either. And
Trish, how did your local friends react? How did your neighbors react who were there in the house? That's a very public moment as well, isn't it?
They were so right. They were so kind. And so they started praying, and they were just so loving. And, they were like, put sugar on it, put salt on it, put whatever on it.
You get the advice, always get the advice. Yeah.
Stop it. That part was hard, but they were super loving and super helpful. And, but it was one of the most horrible things that I have ever experienced. And then, just the months of stretching out his hands so he didn't get a hand contracture, and, the skin. And even to this day, I still check and make sure that skin is still stretching and still moves well, right. Because he's growing. Yeah. And just seeing it as a reminder of it all the time.
Well, thank you for sharing that traumatic event. That's what it is, a traumatic event when your child goes through something like that. We still remember when Asia was just a baby. We took her out to Pakistan when she was 3 months, and we still remember that first few weeks. We were in hospital with her, and they put a drip into her head. She was dehydrated, and we didn't really understand what they were doing, and they'd come and take her to round off the hospital, and we're like, where are they going with her? Let's follow. We don't know what they don't always communicate everything.
So hard.
You can't.
Right.
Yeah, you just can't. Those memories will always stay with you. But on the other hand, we also talk on this podcast a lot about, the danger of the sort of Western Messiah complex, and we're here to help, and we've got everything together. And events like that just humble you, put you on such a human level, don't they? With your friends in the host culture, amongst your neighbors. You're a mum. In that point, you are nothing but a mum who loves her child, or a dad who loves a child. And that connection that they see you in, the most vulnerable human place you could be, and that must be such a bonding experience for all of you in that situation.
Yeah, I agree. When we've learned to really cherish those times when we really actually need help, and our friends here can really actually help us. Yeah, those are really, really treasured situations.
Yes, definitely. It's one of my favorite promises of Jesus in the scriptures is when he says, you may, whatever you give up, I will give you mothers and brothers and sisters and daughters. I will bring you community, even if you've left all this behind for me and my sake. I can provide. I am still faithful. I am still good. And I'm, like you say, I see you. I know what you need.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any key scriptures that, as you look back, just, on this decade that you've had, plus, more, any key scriptures that have really sustained you, that you or that you just go back to when you're in a sort of season of sadness or loneliness? What sustains you in those times?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm a very here and now kind of a person. And so I can't say that I have had one, I don't have a lot of scriptures that I've clung to for the last 15 years, let's say, but I think just knowing that Jesus loves the people that have not yet heard about his love, that he allows us to be part, he chooses to let us be part of that getting to share that gift with them in scriptures like the Great Commission, in Revelation, where we see people from all tribes and tongues worshiping. Those are really, really precious to me, that, and we do keep coming back to those.
The end of the story.
Yes.
This is the hope that we're looking forward to. This is why we do what we do. This is why it's worth it, even if we suffer.
Right. And getting to see God change people's lives and his love transform people's lives has been so precious. I know that there are lots of workers that never get to see fruit from their prayer and from their labor. And we have gotten to see fruit, and people come into the kingdom and experience and be changed and transformed and healed by God's love in depth and also in breadth. And that has really been helpful to watch God heal a chronic problem. Just he heals it instantly, or he heals a chronic sadness or a chronic shame problem, either instantly or over time with year in, year out discipleship. To watch people grow in maturity and is super, super precious. To hear stories. I have never personally had a vision, an open vision of Jesus, but people that we've discipled have. And it sounds awesome. And hearing about those kinds of stories is just, it just really keeps us going.
Yeah. What would the population be in Chad for those who know nothing about that part of the world? Is it a country that's, even, I'm not quite sure, is it 80%, 90% Muslim, or?
I am the wrong person to ask. I know our town is probably 90.
Okay.
But the country, we're in sub-Sahel, and often the northern parts of those sub-Sahel countries are mostly Muslim, and the southern parts are mostly Christian culture.
Right.
So we are in the northern part. So I don't know what the stats are on the country as a whole, but I know that the city and the area where we live is the percentage is quite high of Muslims.
Right. Okay. And so, you're talking about lives transformed. Are you seeing Muslims come to Christ then a little bit around you?
Yes, around us, and then also in Sudan, across the border, where we still are discipling some of our dear brothers and key leaders in that movement. And so there's a network of house churches, around 2,000 believers over the last 15 years.
Wow, that's
which is super fun and exciting. And and then here in our town, we have gotten to heavily invest in a handful of people, but probably about 100 people, mostly women, have come into the kingdom in the last 5 years or so.
Wow.
Which is really exciting. When we moved to Chad, we moved to our town, we kept finding women who would divorce their husbands.
Mm.
And we were like, what kind of place is this where Muslim women divorce their husbands?
Mm.
How does this even work? Well, what we found out is it's the kind of place where women come into the kingdom.
Oh, wow.
There's something about the boldness to divorce their husband who is addicted to drugs or doesn't send money, but is been out of town, for 2 years or 5 years. There's something about the spunk in those women that say, God loves me. I'm all over that. I want some of that. So
wow.
it's been really amazing and precious.
Yeah, that is interesting. And community-wise, do they face pressure coming to Christ? I don't know how tough the Islam is in that region of the world, in that part of the Muslim world. These ladies going to face some opposition.
Well,
is it hard to...
You definitely hear stories. There's a woman in that town that we were driving to 13 hours south of us, very, very heavily persecuted. And you hear about persecution. Maybe it could be that our style of ministry lends itself a little bit to less unnecessary attention, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So one of my closest friends, I encouraged her from day one when I shared with her the very first thing about God's love. I told her, share this with your husband, share this with your friends and your children. I'm not going to study with you unless you are openly telling the people in your life about it. And so because of that, her journey was very gradual and very gentle. And her husband, who until she passed away recently, a few months ago, but her husband is still not a believer. But one of her last words about him was, yes, he's close, though. He's close to the kingdom. But, she won, I mean, countless women. I can't even, maybe 100 women just herself that we don't really fully know, because she just sowed the gospel so widely and handed out solar players with the scriptures on them.
Yes.
I mean, she's handed out hundreds and hundreds of players to people who were interested. And so I don't even, there was no follow-up. So you can't even know how many people she actually reached.
Yeah.
But we just know in the network of sort of house churches, there were under 100 people. And so, yeah.
Very exciting. Wow. What a joy when it's happening all around you and you have connections into that and can see some of it. That's really encouraging. It, like you say, for those of us who lived in countries where there were, just 2 or 3 believers, maybe 5 or 10.
Right.
Really encouraging that we, to be part of a community in different parts of the world where they're seeing hundreds, and we can rejoice in that. And it really encourages me always.
I think because her journey into the kingdom was so gentle and she invited people on the journey along the way. And then, I mean, there were so many positive changes in her life. Like her marriage she was ready to divorce her husband. And in these last few years, I mean, they had a beautiful relationship. She really loved him and he really loved her because she changed, not because he changed. And her children all believe, and they have a very special unity and kingdom mindset. They're very poor, but they know that they are daughters and sons of the King, and they hold their heads high like that, and they live like that. Wow. So they are, there has been so much transformation in her life and in her immediate community. So it's exciting to see numbers of people come into the kingdom, but it's also just a precious privilege to watch someone's life be transformed over 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, it's not just about how many people can meet Jesus, is it? It's very much, we want to see villages and towns and even nations transformed by the upside down kingdom of God. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow, Trish, thank you so much for being with us today, sharing so much of your heart and, the good and the bad. I love that we can end on that note of lives transformed, the kingdom spreading, And yeah, well, we'll continue to pray for you guys. Bless you as you continue out there. I know one friend who's been out to Chad and said almost every time he had a meal, there was sand in everything. And he said, this is not where I want to be called. So
yes.
I know it's not an easy country
yes.
to live in, but I'm so glad the Lord has rooted you there and given you community. We could talk about a lot more, but thank you for sharing today. And yeah, God bless you guys.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you so much. Blessings to you too.
Okay, bye. Thanks so much for listening. I hope today's episode has been inspiring and challenging. For more, check us out on our website, frontiers.org.uk, and on all social media platforms, @FrontiersUK. Have a great week, and make sure you don't miss our next episode.